Welcome to our podcast, where we dive into the fascinating world of animals. We cover it all: wildlife conservation and unique species to ethical care practices and animal behavior. Whether you're an animal lover, a pet owner, or just curious about the natural world, join us for insightful discussions, expert interviews, and fun facts about the creatures we share our planet with. Please tune in and discover something new about the incredible animals surrounding us.
Hey everyone, welcome back for another deep dive. You ready to get into it? Today we're tackling livestock production in the U.S.
All right, sounds good.
Yeah, and we're really going to hit all the big points. Think dairy and beef cattle, swine, goats, all that. But with a focus on animal health, preventing diseases, and ultimately how all of that impacts the food on our plates. We're drawing from UC Davis's Food Animal Production Manual for this one, by the way. It's from their Western Institute for Food Safety and Security. Pretty fascinating stuff.
Yeah, it really is a great resource.
So when we picture livestock, it's tempting to imagine these picturesque farms, right?
Yeah.
But the reality of livestock production here in the U.S. is that it's a huge, huge industry.
Oh, absolutely. It's massive. I
Yeah.
mean, the amount of milk and meat they produce every year is just, it's pretty mind-boggling. To give you an idea, we're talking over 84 billion kilograms of milk annually just in the U.S.
Wow, that's...
And here's a real head-scratcher. We've actually seen a decrease in dairy farms and even the number of cows since the 1940s, but milk production has actually gone up.
Seriously, how's that even possible?
Efficiency. It all comes down to efficiency. Milk production per cow has skyrocketed, like 5 times what it used to be. Think about it, the average dairy cow in the U.S. is now producing something like 20,000 pounds of milk every year.
20,000. I don't even know what to compare that to.
Imagine a small swimming pool. That's how much milk we're talking about from just one cow.
That's unbelievable. Talk about a transformation in the way these dairy farms operate.
Oh, totally. And it's not just dairy. Take the pork industry, for instance. Over 100 million pigs are processed every year just in the U.S. It really shows you the sheer scale and how efficient modern livestock production has become.
It's a whole other world, really.
Yeah.
And within that world, I'm guessing there are different types of livestock operations, right?
You've got it. We've got cow-calf operations, then there's backgrounder or stalker, feedlot, and seed stock operations. Each one has its own unique role in getting that product from, well, pasture to plate, as they say.
Let's break those down a bit. I'm guessing when most people think farm, cow-calf is what comes to mind.
Exactly. It's where calves are born, raised until they're weaned, which usually happens around 6 to 8 months old. They're the backbone of the beef industry, and a lot of times those cows will then go on to other types of operations.
So that's like the starting point for a lot of these animals. What happens after that?
Well, that's where backgrounder or stalker operations come in. They take those weaned calves and raise them till they're ready for the feedlot, kind of like the middle school of cattle, right? They're grazing, they're growing, packing on the pounds, getting prepped for the next phase.
And the feedlots where they will really bulk up before.
You guess. Feedlots are all about maximizing weight gain. The cattle get a very specific diet, high in energy, usually with a lot of grains like corn. That helps them get to the right weight and develop that marbling.
Marbling. That beautiful intramuscular fat, that's what makes a steak so juicy.
You got it. Now, seed stock operations are a little different. Their focus is breeding. They're raising top-notch, purebred animals. Think of them as the elite athletes of the livestock world. The offspring from these animals are usually sold to those cow-calf operations so they can improve the genetics of their herds.
So it's like this whole interconnected network, all these specialized operations. It's fascinating, but wow, it's complex. I can see why you need a whole manual to navigate all this.
Oh, for sure. And that was just a quick overview. Each one of those operations has its own unique challenges, its own set of regulations and best practices. It's a lot.
Right. So we've got all these different types of operations, each one playing a vital role.
Yeah.
But at the center of it all, of course, is the animal itself. Let's hone in on the life of a dairy cow, for instance.
Sure. It all starts with a brand new calf.
Oh, I can just imagine those big brown eyes, those shaky little legs.
Those first few hours are crucial. The calf needs colostrum right away. That's the first milk the mother produces, and it's packed with antibodies that protect the calf from all kinds of diseases.
Like nature's first line of defense.
Exactly. Now, here's where the path splits for those male and female dairy calves. If it's a female, she's usually raised as a replacement for an older cow in the herd. They're either raised right there on the farm, or sometimes they're sent to special heifer raising operations.
Heifer raising operations. That's interesting. What are those like?
Basically, they're farms that specialize in raising those young female cows until they're old enough to breed. It lets the dairy farms really focus on milk production while making sure the heifers are raised in the best possible environment.
Like sending them off to boarding school?
You could say that. So while they're away, the mother cows are busy doing their thing, producing milk.
Right. What about those male calves, though?
Well, that's where things get a little trickier. Male dairy calves don't produce milk, so they're not as valuable in the dairy industry. A lot of them end up getting sold pretty soon after they're born. Some are raised for veal, others might go into beef production. It really depends.
That makes sense, I guess. It's interesting, the dairy industry isn't just about the milk itself. It's tied to these other industries, veal and beef.
Oh, absolutely. It's all connected.
It really is.
Yeah.
Okay, let's go back to those female calves being raised as replacements. What happens when they're old enough to breed?
Well, just like us, cows need to get pregnant to make milk. So those heifers are bred, sometimes naturally, sometimes through artificial insemination. And then after about 9 months, gestation period for cows is around 9 months, they give birth to their first calf.
So it's this cycle of pregnancy and lactation.
Exactly. A dairy cow will typically lactate, so produce milk for about 10 months after giving birth. And then that cycle usually repeats for a few years, 3 to 5 years, with the cow having a calf roughly every 12 months.
It's kind of amazing when you think about it, how we've taken this natural process and, well, streamlined it for efficiency. But I imagine there are challenges that come with managing a herd of dairy cows, especially when it comes to keeping them healthy.
Oh, absolutely. Livestock, just like any other living creature, they can get sick. And when you're dealing with large numbers of animals, preventing disease from spreading, that's a huge priority.
Right. So what are some of those common health challenges that dairy cows face?
One of the big ones is mastitis. It's an inflammation of the udder, and it's usually caused by a bacterial infection. It can be really painful for the cow, and it affects their milk production too.
Oh, I bet. And does it affect the milk itself?
Yeah, it can. Mastitis can change the composition of the milk, and in serious cases, it can even contaminate the milk with bacteria. That's why catching and treating mastitis early on is so important. Not just for the cow to feel better, but to make sure the milk supply is safe.
So it really has implications for both animal health and food safety.
Exactly. Another common issue is lameness. Basically, when a cow is having trouble walking.
Ah, those poor things. What
Yeah.
causes that in dairy cows?
It could be a few things, but a lot of times it's something called foot rot. It's a bacterial infection, affects the tissues between their toes, and it's painful.
Sounds kind of gruesome.
Yeah, not a fun one. And it's a big problem in the dairy industry because it can lead to lower milk production, weight loss. In really bad cases, it can even make them infertile.
So preventing and treating foot rot is key. How do they usually manage it?
Antibiotics are often part of the treatment, along with pain relief. Sometimes they even have to do corrective trimming on the hoof. To try to prevent it, it's all about keeping the barns and pastures clean and making sure those hooves are well maintained.
So like a multi-pronged approach,
Yeah,
just like with mastitis.
that's right. Taking care of livestock, it's about looking at the whole picture. Everything from their diet and hygiene to catching diseases early and treating them properly.
And speaking of treatment, I know antibiotic use in livestock is something that people talk about a lot. What can you tell us about that?
Yeah, it's a really important issue, and honestly, I think it's often misunderstood. Just like with humans, sometimes antibiotics are necessary to treat bacterial infections in livestock, but it's crucial that they're used responsibly. Otherwise, we run the risk of creating antibiotic-resistant bacteria, and that's a whole other can of worms.
Right, and that's a concern for human health, too.
It's all connected. This is what they call a one health issue, meaning the health of people, animals, and the environment. It's all intertwined. So veterinarians and farmers, they have to work together to make sure antibiotics are only used when they're absolutely needed.
Makes sense. It's about striking that balance, taking care of the animals, but also making sure these important drugs will still work when we need them.
Exactly. And another key aspect of managing livestock health is biosecurity.
Biosecurity, is that just a fancy way of saying keep the farm clean?
It's more than just cleanliness, though. That's a big part of it. It's really a whole approach to stopping diseases from getting into a farm or spreading within a farm or even a whole region.
Okay, so it's about disease control, but on a much larger scale.
You got it. It involves a bunch of different things, like controlling who and what can come onto the farm, having really strict sanitation protocols, making sure animals are vaccinated, and keeping a close eye on their health overall.
So minimizing risk at every point.
Exactly. And here's where those different types of livestock operations we were talking about come into play again. Every single operation, whether it's cow-calf, backgrounder, feedlot, they all need their own biosecurity plan tailored to the specific risks that come with that stage of production.
Like links in a chain, each one just as important as the next.
Exactly. And it's not just about protecting the animals. It's about making sure the food supply is safeguarded, and ultimately that protects public health.
Right, so biosecurity is something that everyone has a stake in, not just the farmers themselves.
Absolutely. Farmers, veterinarians, truck drivers, even consumers, we all have a role to play in keeping our food systems safe and secure.
That's a good point. It's easy to forget how interconnected it all is when you're just at the store picking up some milk or ground beef.
I know, right? But understanding the ins and outs of livestock production, the things that farmers deal with, the measures in place to protect animal and human health, it helps us make smarter choices as consumers.
Couldn't agree more. Okay, so we've mainly been talking about dairy cows so far. What about beef cattle? Is their journey similar?
There are some differences. Both dairy and beef cows, they start out on those cow-calf operations, but their paths diverge after weaning.
Because with beef cattle, it's all about meat production in the end.
Right. So after they're weaned, those beef calves, usually they're around 6 to 10 months old at that point. They might go to a backgrounder or stalker operation. There, they're grazing on pasture, gaining weight a little more slowly.
Sounds like a bit more of a laid-back upbringing compared to those dairy calves that are being prepped for milk production.
You could say that. And then most beef cattle in the U.S., they'll spend their last few months at a feedlot.
That's where the intensive grain feeding comes in, right? To get that marbling.
Exactly. Feedlots are all about efficiency. They have those carefully formulated diets, and the animal's health and growth are closely monitored.
Really interesting to see how each stage is tailored for a specific outcome.
It is. And it just goes to show how specialized the livestock industry has become.
So we've talked about dairy and beef cattle. Now, what about swine? They're another huge part of the livestock industry here in the U.S.
Oh, absolutely. But swine production, especially here in the U.S., it's evolved quite differently compared to cattle.
Oh, how so?
Well, unlike cattle, who spend at least part of their lives on pasture, most pigs in the U.S. are raised indoors in these large-scale facilities.
So it's a much more controlled environment.
Exactly. These facilities are designed to maximize efficiency. They've got climate control, automatic feeding systems, even slotted floors for managing waste.
A far cry from pigs roaming around on a farm.
It is. And this change, moving towards raising pigs indoors, it's had a huge impact. It affects how they're raised, the kind of health challenges they face, even how the meat tastes.
Wow, that's fascinating.
Yeah.
So what's it actually like for a pig in one of these systems?
Well, it all starts with the sow. That's a female pig who's had piglets. They're housed in groups or sometimes individually in gestation stalls, and they're bred, usually through artificial insemination.
So a very controlled breeding process.
Yeah. After about 115 days, that's roughly the gestation period, the sows are moved to farrowing crates. These are designed to give them a safe space to give birth and take care of the piglets.
And how many piglets do they usually have?
They can have pretty big litters, often 10 to 14 piglets.
Wow, it's a lot of mouths to feed.
It is. The piglets stay with their mother for the first 3 to 4 weeks, nursing and growing really fast. And then comes weaning.
That's when they're separated from their mothers.
Yep. Weaning is a big deal for piglets, a big transition. They go to nursery barns, where they're grouped with other piglets of a similar age, and they're given special food to help them grow.
Piglet kindergarten.
Something like that. They spend around 6 to 8 weeks in the nursery, and then they're moved to what they call grow-finish barns. And that's where they'll live out the rest of their lives.
And that's where they put on all the weight before they're, well,
Exactly. The grow-finish phase usually takes about 4 to 5 months. During that time, they're on a high-energy diet to make them grow as quickly as possible.
So a much shorter lifespan compared to cattle.
Oh, yeah, definitely. That quick turnaround time is one of the reasons why pork production is so efficient.
It's amazing how much we've been able to optimize these systems. But I'm sure even in a controlled environment like that, there are still health challenges.
Absolutely. Pigs, especially when they're raised in these indoor settings, they're prone to respiratory diseases, pneumonia, for example.
That makes sense when they're all living in such close proximity.
Exactly. Making sure there's proper ventilation and good air quality. That's crucial for preventing those kinds of diseases. Another concern is gastrointestinal problems, things like ileitis and swine dysentery.
What causes those?
Could be bacteria, viruses, even stress. And just like with other livestock, sometimes antibiotics are necessary to treat those conditions.
And again, it comes down to using those antibiotics responsibly so we don't make the problem of resistance even worse.
Exactly.
It's amazing how much work goes into making sure these animals are healthy.
It's a challenging field, that's for sure. But it's also really rewarding.
And absolutely vital to our food system.
I couldn't agree more.
It's really eye-opening to think about everything that goes into getting that pork from the farm to our tables.
Yeah, there are a lot of different pieces of the puzzle.
And speaking of different pieces, we haven't even talked about goats yet. How do they fit into all of this? Are their lives similar to the cattle and swine we've been discussing?
Goats are interesting. They're not produced on nearly the same scale as cows or pigs here in the US, but they are becoming more and more popular.
What's driving that trend?
A few things, actually. For one, goat meat is getting more popular all the time. People see it as a healthier option, a lean protein that's also more sustainable than some other red meats.
Now that you mention it, I've noticed more goat dishes on menus these days.
Exactly. And then there's the whole dairy side. Goat milk products, like cheeses and yogurts, those are becoming more popular too. Partly because people think they're healthier, but also because they just taste so unique.
I love a good goat cheese myself.
Yeah.
There's a tanginess to it that you just don't get with cow's milk cheese.
That's a great way to put it. Goat milk just has a different makeup compared to cow's milk, and that's what creates those distinct flavors.
So how are goats usually raised here in the U.S.? Do they follow a similar system to cows or pigs?
It depends, but generally speaking, goat production tends to be less intensive than what we've been talking about with cattle and swine. A lot of goat farms, especially smaller ones, they're still using those more traditional pasture-based systems.
Which makes sense. Goats have a reputation for being good grazers, right?
Exactly. Goats are browsers, meaning they like to eat a mix of plants, shrubs, weeds, grasses, so they can graze on land that might not be suitable for other types of livestock.
So they can be a good option for sustainability in some cases.
That's right. And because they're smaller than cows, they don't have as much of an impact on the land.
That's a good point. What about in terms of their health? Do goats face similar challenges to cows and pigs?
They do have some health concerns that are unique to goats. One of the big ones is a bacterial infection called caseous lymphadenitis, or CL for short.
CL, what's that exactly?
It's a disease that causes abscesses, usually in the lymph nodes. It can lead to weight loss, less milk production, and in severe cases, it can even be fatal.
Oh, wow. That's pretty serious. How do they manage it?
Unfortunately, there's no cure for CL, so it's all about trying to prevent the bacteria from spreading, which can be tough because it can live in the environment for a long time.
So just like with other livestock, biosecurity is key.
Absolutely. Goat producers have to be really careful about monitoring their herds for any signs of CL and then isolating any animals that are infected.
Early detection and containment.
Exactly. Goats can also be susceptible to some of the same diseases that we talked about with cattle, like pneumonia and intestinal parasites.
Right. It seems like those are pretty common challenges across different types of livestock.
They are, and the same principles of good hygiene, proper nutrition, and regular vet care. Those all apply to goats just as much as they do to any other kind of livestock.
It always comes back to giving those animals the best possible care throughout their lives.
Well said.
Wow, this has been incredibly eye-opening. We've covered so much ground, from the sheer size and scope of the livestock industry to the unique challenges faced by different species, their health, how it all impacts our food. It's a lot to take in.
It really is a fascinating field, and there's always more to learn.
That's for sure. One thing that really stands out to me is just how interconnected everything is. The different types of operations, the health of the animals, the safety of our food supply, it's all linked.
It's a good reminder that food production is a system, and every single part of that system matters.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And the more we understand as consumers about how that system works, the better choices we can make.
Couldn't agree more. When it comes to something as important as our food, knowledge is power.
Well said. Well, I think we've definitely gone deep on this one. Thank you so much for taking us on this journey through the world of livestock production. It's been incredibly insightful.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me.
And to all of you listening, we hope you found this deep dive informative. Keep those questions coming. Stay curious about where your food comes from. Until next time.